Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Now tell me, what does Warhammer have in common with contact sports like rugby or the NFL? The chances are you're thinking not a lot, but I think there are some definite things we can learn from those sports when we apply ourselves to the art of Warhammer. Now in Warhammer the old world, with the loss of the step-up rule, charging has become really important. The opportunity to get that bonus to your initiative in order to clear as many of the fighting rank of your opponent's units as possible and reduce the number of strike backs, giving you really an increase in that combat res bonus and a chance to try and break the enemy line. And some factions, more than others, really play into this idea that charging is beneficial. The Bretonians, I think, are a great example, with their vast amount of heavy cavalry at their disposal, wielding lances with their +2 to strength on the charge, the bonus armor penetration they get on the charge, but where they're going to struggle if they're caught in a meat grinder of a match. So what does this have to do with contact sport? Well, I've often heard factions like the Bretonians and World Eaters, for example, in Warhammer 40,000 and things like that, people talk around the ABCs. Always be charging. And I think on the face of it, that's pretty solid in certain circumstances. And yes, definitely with Bretonians, they always want to be getting that charge. But I think to be talking in those sort of terms, always be charging, is actually a really gross simplification of where the skill in the game actually is. Let's touch back in briefly with our contact sport. Sure, you can win a collision if you're bigger, stronger, downright meaner than the person that you collide with. Maybe if you're quicker than them and you've built up some momentum as well, that's going to help. But the smaller, static player can still win that collision, and they can do it through skill and technique. In Warhammer terms, anyone can launch a long charge, roll some dice, and hope that a unit goes crashing in. But the dice aren't always going to be in your favour. And on your long charges, maybe only one of the two units you're hoping to get in makes it. Maybe they're hitting front on into a unit with heavy armour and shields, a unit of dwarf warriors or longbeards, for example, that quite frankly are going absolutely nowhere fast. And that includes in reverse. So sure, you may charge, you may even win that round of combat, but you find yourself suckered into an arm wrestle, when really what you want to do is make your charge and blast through the enemy line, and causing havoc, making them manoeuvre to meet you, exposing flanks, rear arcs, and all that sort of good stuff. So my proposal is this. We stop talking about ABC, always be charging, and we put it in slightly different terms. ABC, agility before contact. This is something I used to be involved with coaching on the rugby field, and it's about moving yourself just before that moment of impact, changing angles, hitting weak shoulders, things like that. Maximising your opportunity not only to win the collision, but to win the collision in a meaningful way and get that breakthrough, either bursting through the tackle or putting yourself in a good position that your mates can come along and help you out. It's that movement before the contact which is so important, and I think that it's also going to apply to Warhammer. How so? Well, it's about not the charge itself, but setting up those charges, getting yourself into a good position that when you charge, you are holding all of the good cards in your hand, and deciding when is a good moment to charge and when do you just hold back just for that moment. So sure, you can have that one unit of Grail Knights, they could go thundering into the unit of Chaos Warriors, they'll do some damage, maybe they'll force them back. But what if you waited just that little bit longer? And what if it wasn't a Grail unit going in? What if it's a unit of Grail Knights supported by a unit of Knights of the Realm? Both units 5 or 6 wide, and suddenly the fighting ranks are that much bigger, you've got that much more attacks, you're doing that much more damage on the charge, dramatically increasing the odds of you getting rid of that Chaos Warrior unit's fighting rank, breaking through their combat resolution, particularly if you've still got first charge available, and causing such a decisive win that they're more likely to break and flee. Because that's what you want, a unit to break as you hit it. You run them down. With one unit, another's reforming to threaten the flanks of the rest of the enemy army. And Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. You've got a decisive advantage in the game. You've created an edge, a breaking point in their line where they ain't going to have to start making maneuvers to turn to face you. And if they don't, you can simply run riot. And that, I think, is really where the skill in Warhammer lies. It's not just in the throwing dice at a charge, it's about the manoeuvring, it's about the precision to get yourself into the position where you have the best possible chance of a positive outcome. I'll regale you with a tale from 8th edition when I was playing with an Empire army against Dark Elves. And at the time, Dark Elves were one of the stronger factions in the game, shall we say, and Empire were definitely not. My opponent came charging forward and crashed into a long line of infantry. Yes, 8th edition was different because we had hordes and we had step up and all that sort of stuff. The Dark Elves came in and they absolutely battered a unit of Empire state troops holding against them. I think it was Witch Elves that came crashing in, if memory serves. The state troops were duly roundly defeated and forced to flee, but not before they had taken the impetus out of the Dark Elf attack by merely standing there and causing a few casualties on the way. The positioning of the units around them meant that on my turn, a unit of Inner Circle Knights was able then to counterattack and go flying into the Witch Elves, which are now slightly reduced in number. And with some good fortune, I have to admit, managed to break through. The Witch Elves were destroyed. And all that remained in the back line for the Dark Elves was their very powerful sorcerer and a small block of spearmen, which then spent the rest of the game desperately trying to run away from my marauding unit of Inner Circle Knights. The placement of that knight unit as a tactical reserve and being in the right place at the right time meant I was able to decisively turn the battle on its head from one where I was under huge amounts of pressure and looking at a massive defeat to one where I was able to claw out a 14-6 victory. And it remains actually, I think, one of my favourite wins in a game of Warhammer. Partly because it was a victory against the odds, but also because the army acted as an army should do. A combination of infantry and cavalry working together to create the opportunity for a decisive strike. It was the agility before contact of the knights, of the units around them, working together effectively to create the opportunity to win the important collision. So there we have it. ABC, always be charging. I think it's just too simple and it takes away from understanding the nuance and is probably not helpful for newer players as well. who are presented with this concept of just charge, or at least that's what they think they're being told. Agility before contact. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening to my thoughts on this topic. If you've enjoyed this video, do consider dropping a like and possibly a subscribe. It's the best way to help the channel, along with just spending the time watching these videos. Thank you once again for watching. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.